When people ask me who the greatest baseball players of all time were, they usually expect a simple answer. Maybe one name, maybe a statistic, maybe a record that nobody ever broke. But after spending most of my life around this game, I learned something important. Greatness is not always measured by numbers alone. I played in an era filled with legends. I caught some of the best pitchers who ever lived. I stood behind the plate against hitters who could change a game with one swing. I shared clubhouses with future Hall of Famers and watched opposing stars do things that made even professionals stop and stare. When you've seen baseball from that close, you begin to recognize the difference between a very good player and someone truly unforgettable. This list is not based on awards. It is not based on statistics printed in a record book. It comes from respect. It comes from the feeling players get when a certain man steps onto the field and everyone immediately knows the game has changed. Those are the players who stay with you long after the final out. Some of the men on this list were teammates. Some were opponents. One was already a legend before I ever put on a Yankees uniform. But every one of them left a mark on baseball that can still be felt today. When people talk about the greatest players ever, dozens of names deserve consideration, but if I had to choose only five, these are the men I would pick. These are the players who, in my eyes, represented the very best baseball had to offer. Let's start with a man who made greatness look effortless. Stan Musial was never my teammate, but I spent enough years around him to understand why so many players spoke about him with a level of respect that bordered on admiration. In baseball, respect is hard to earn. Admiration's even harder. Stan had both. When people today talk about the greatest hitters ever, they often jump straight to the famous names. Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle. But the players who actually shared the field with Stan Musial knew something many fans overlooked. Day after day, year after year, nobody was more dependable than Stan Musial. What impressed me most was how complete he was. He wasn't a player who relied on one skill. He could hit for average, he could hit for power, he could drive the ball to every part of the field. Pitchers would spend hours trying to find a weakness, and most of the time they walked away frustrated. There simply wasn't much you could do to him. I saw plenty of great hitters during my career. Most of them had certain situations where they were especially dangerous. Stan seemed dangerous all the time. If the game was close, he could hurt you. If runners were on base, he could hurt you. If the game looked out of reach, he could still find a way to change it. That kind of consistency is incredibly rare. The thing I remember most about Stan was how calm he appeared. Some stars played with visible intensity. Others carried themselves like celebrities. Stan Musial never needed any of that. He walked onto the field, did his job, and somehow made extraordinary performances look ordinary. That may be one reason people sometimes forget just how dominant he really was. Players noticed, managers noticed, pitchers certainly noticed. Whenever his name appeared in a lineup card, nobody took him lightly. You knew he could beat you in a dozen different ways. That kind of reputation doesn't come from one great season. It comes from a lifetime of excellence. What made Stan special was that he combined greatness with humility. In a sport full of large personalities, he remained approachable and respected by virtually everyone. You rarely heard former opponents speak badly about him. That alone tells you something. For me, Stan Musial represented the kind of player every organization dreams of having. Talented, reliable, professional, dangerous every single day. That's why he earns a place on my list of the greatest players who ever lived. Willie Mays was not just a great baseball player. He was the kind of player who could make a stadium full of people believe they had just witnessed something impossible. Even among the legends of my era, Willie stood apart. I got to watch him during a time when baseball was overflowing with talent. Every league had stars. Every city had heroes. Yet, whenever people started debating who could truly do everything on a baseball field, the conversation almost always found its way back to Willie Mays. What made Willie different was that there was no weakness in his game. Most players are remembered for one thing. Some are great hitters, some are great fielders, some are great runners. Willie somehow managed to be all three at the highest level. As a catcher, I paid attention to players who could affect every inning. Willie was one of those rare men. He could save a run with his glove in the outfield. He could steal a base when a team needed a spark. Then he could step to the plate and hit a ball 500 feet. There simply weren't many players in baseball history who could impact the game in so many different ways. Of course, everyone remembers the catch. Even decades later, people still talk about it because it captured who Willie was. The play showed his speed, instincts, confidence, and athletic ability all at once. But the truth is that Willie made spectacular plays so often that players around the league almost expected them. What impressed me most was the energy he brought to the field. Baseball seasons are long. 162 games can wear down even the greatest players. Willie seemed to play every game with enthusiasm. Fans loved him because he looked like he genuinely enjoyed being out there. His teammates loved him because his excitement was contagious. Opponents respected him because they knew he could change a game at any moment. You could play 9 strong innings against the Giants and still lose because Willie found one opportunity, one swing, one catch, one stolen base. Sometimes that was all he needed. Many people have called Willie Mays the most complete player who ever lived. After everything I saw during my career, it's hard to argue against that. He possessed power, speed, defense, intelligence, and leadership. More importantly, he performed under pressure when the spotlight was brightest. There have been many superstars in baseball history. There have been many Hall of Famers, but very few players made the game look as effortless and exciting as Willie Mays. For that reason, he belongs near the very top of any list of baseball's greatest players. Ted Williams was an opponent, and from where I sat behind home plate, that was not always a comfortable experience, and I've caught against a lot of great hitters. I've watched Hall of Famers step into the batter's box, but very few men ever made pitchers as nervous as Ted Williams. The first thing people noticed was his swing. It looked smooth, balanced, and powerful all at the same time. But what truly separated Ted from everyone else was not the swing itself. It was his understanding of hitting. I honestly believe he saw the game differently than most players. Pitchers spend their entire careers trying to create uncertainty. They want hitters guessing. They want them chasing pitches outside the strike zone. They want them uncomfortable. Ted Williams seemed immune to all of it. He knew exactly what he was looking for, and if he didn't get it, he simply refused to swing. As a catcher, that kind of discipline was frustrating to watch. You could call a perfect sequence of pitches. You could move the ball around the corners. You could try to fool him with speed changes. Somehow, Ted always seemed one step ahead. It felt like he had already solved the puzzle before the game even started. What amazed me was how selective he could be without becoming passive. Many hitters who wait for the perfect pitch become easier to attack. Ted was different. The moment a pitcher made a mistake, even a small one, he was ready. And when Ted Williams was ready, bad things usually happened to the other team. His numbers tell part of the story, but they don't tell all of it. The fear he created is harder to measure. Pitchers respected plenty of hitters. They feared Ted Williams. There is a difference. Respect means acknowledging greatness. Fear means knowing that one mistake can cost you the game. Even among fellow players, Ted had a reputation unlike anyone else. If a discussion started about pure hitting ability, his name appeared almost immediately. It didn't matter which team you played for. It didn't matter whether you liked him personally. Everyone understood what they were watching. I also admired how seriously he approached his craft. Ted treated hitting like a science. He studied it. He analyzed it. He searched for ways to improve long after most players would have been satisfied. That relentless pursuit of perfection helped make him one of the most dangerous hitters baseball has ever seen. When people ask me who the greatest pure hitter was, Ted Williams is always near the top of the conversation. His combination of power, patience, intelligence, and confidence created a player unlike any other. That's why he earns the number 3 spot on my list. Mickey Mantle was more than a teammate. For many years, he was the face of the New York Yankees and one of the most naturally gifted athletes I ever saw. I shared a clubhouse with him, traveled with him, celebrated championships with him, and watched him do things on a baseball field that simply didn't seem possible. The remarkable thing about Mickey was that even the statistics don't fully capture how talented he really was. Fans saw the home runs, they saw the headlines. What they didn't always see were the little moments during batting practice or inside the clubhouse when players would just shake their heads in disbelief. Mickey could hit the baseball farther than almost anyone. That part is well known. What many people forget is how fast he was. Early in his career, he ran like an outfielder and hit like a power hitter. Most players are lucky to possess one of those gifts. Mickey had both. I remember pitchers talking about him with a mixture of respect and concern. Facing Mantle was difficult because there was no obvious strategy. He could hit left-handed. He could hit right-handed. He could drive the ball to any part of the park. Even when he wasn't at his best physically, he remained one of the most dangerous hitters in baseball. What always stayed with me was the fact that Mickey accomplished so much while dealing with injuries that would have slowed most players dramatically. People today see the numbers and assume they represent his full potential. Those of us who played with him know the truth. We often wondered what his career would have looked like if his body had stayed healthy. That is a frightening thought because his accomplishments were already extraordinary. He won championships. He won awards. He delivered in the biggest moments. And he did it while carrying physical limitations that many fans never fully understood. Off the field, Mickey was also a beloved teammate. He wasn't someone who acted like a superstar. Despite his fame, he remained approachable and loyal to the people around him. That made players respect him even more. When the Yankees were at their peak, Mickey was often the player opposing teams worried about most. One swing could change everything. One at-bat could alter the course of an entire series. That's the kind of influence only a handful of players ever possess. I've been around baseball my entire life, and very few men were blessed with Mickey Mantle's combination of power, speed, instincts, toughness, and competitive fire. If we're talking about pure natural ability, he belongs in any conversation about the greatest player who ever lived. And yet there is still one man I place above him. I never played with Babe Ruth. I never shared a dugout with him. By the time I arrived in New York, he had already become one of the biggest legends in American sports history. But when you put on a Yankees uniform, you quickly realize something. Babe Ruth never really left. His presence was everywhere. Every great Yankees player who came after him was measured against the standard he created. Every slugger who wore pinstripes heard his name. Every generation of fans compared new stars to the man who transformed baseball forever. That's why I put Babe Ruth at number 1. People today sometimes forget just how different baseball looked before Ruth arrived. The game was played differently. Teams relied more on speed bunting and small ball tactics. Then Babe Ruth came along and changed the sport's identity. Suddenly power became the attraction. Fans came to the ballpark hoping to see something spectacular. And Ruth delivered. The home run numbers alone were astonishing. In many seasons, he was competing against entire teams, not just individual players. He produced totals that seemed impossible for his era. But what impresses me even more is how far ahead he was compared to everyone around him. Great players dominate their competition. Babe Ruth redefined what domination looked like. The stories about him were legendary. The crowds were larger. The excitement was greater. Baseball became America's game in part because Babe Ruth turned it into a spectacle people couldn't ignore. He wasn't just a star athlete, he became a cultural phenomenon. As the years passed, baseball produced countless Hall of Famers. Willie Mays amazed people with his complete game. Ted Williams mastered hitting. Mickey Mantle possessed unbelievable natural talent. Stan Musial delivered excellence year after year. Yet every one of those players was chasing a standard that Ruth helped establish. What I admire most is the scale of his impact. Statistics can be broken, records can fall. Influence is different. Decades after his retirement, players were still talking about him. Fans were still talking about him. Young ball players still dreamed of becoming the next Babe Ruth. Very few athletes transcend their sport. Babe Ruth did. That's why when people ask me who the greatest baseball player of all time was, my answer remains the same. There have been many legends, there have been many champions, but only one Babe Ruth. For me, he sits alone at the top. Baseball has given us countless unforgettable players. Some were extraordinary hitters, some were brilliant fielders. Some dominated with power, speed, or intelligence. Choosing only 5 names is never easy because this game has been blessed with generations of greatness. But when I think about the players who defined baseball during my lifetime and beyond, these are the men who stand out most. Stan Musial for his consistency, Willie Mays for his complete game, Ted Williams for his mastery of hitting, Mickey Mantle for his incredible natural gifts, and Babe Ruth for changing baseball forever. The truth is that every generation creates its own heroes. Fans who grew up in different eras will always have different opinions. That's one of the things that makes baseball special. The debate never ends. But if you ask me, Yogi Berra, to name the greatest baseball players of all time, these are the 5 men I would choose. Because greatness is not just about numbers. It's about the way people remember you long after the final game is over. And these 5 men will be remembered forever.